House Dres is one of the great houses of Morrowind and is based solely on the mainland of Morrowind, and they are based out of their ancestral capital, home of Tyr. Now, Dres traces its roots far back to the First Era, officially establishing itself after a successful slave raid on Thorn by Grandmaster Thalthil Dres, thus starting their long-standing tradition of slavery. Now, they also claimed that it was their agricultural production that supplied all of Morrowind with the necessary resources and food to help the continuation of the Dunmer Society. This was established as far back into the First Era. Now, that transitions into the Second Era, where they really grab a hold of their power. And by 582 of the Second Era, Dres had expanded into Kraganmore, and despite growing Redoran, Indoril, and Hlaalu influence, Dres also ruled Mournhold, which was the capital of Morrowind. Now, the entire city was also surrounded by Dres's plantations, which helps explain and understand how they got control of the city itself, and it shows how they really did supply all of Morrowind's food resources. Not all of it exactly, obviously there's other things that contribute there, but it explains that they have a large contribution to this resource. Now, in 559 of the Second Era, Dres starts to suffer some setbacks, and this was during the War of the Two Houses, which saw one battle, that was basically it, what a war, and really a Hlaalu victory, despite Dres having the bigger numbers. Dres lost access to a trade post that was south of Narcissus as a result. Now, by 572 of the Second Era, Dres suffered another setback when Councilman Glathis Dres was assassinated by an Argonian slave known as Haytamine, who went on to become the dominant Argonian leader of the Ebonheart Pact. Now, officially, Dres supported the Ebonheart Pact, although while they liberated their slaves out of good faith, they still unofficially practiced it, if that makes sense. Now, losing a primary leader and its dominant source of labor and profit, Dres struggled. When the Daggerfall Covenant invaded Stonefalls in 582 of the Second Era, they struggled to hold Ebonheart. At the same time, Indoril captured Grandmaster Omin's son in Kraganmore, and they were manipulated into unknowingly helping the Malborn cult in Mournhold. Despite Septim's invasion of Morrowind, Dres posed a guerrilla war stance against the Empire. However, when Vivek signed the armistice, Dres reluctantly agreed on the condition that slavery remain legal within Morrowind. The Third Era didn't start off too well for Dres, at least. They lost their traditional allies in Indoril when its members began to commit suicide after the signing of the armistice. Furthermore, due to their waning influence and the rise of Hlaalu due to their connection to the Empire, they lost both Kraganmore and Ebonheart. On top of that, an Argonian slave revolt happened in 396 of the Third Era, which led to the Arnesian War, which saw the Dunmer victorious in a united front. However, it only goes to show that this practice of slavery is starting to become more and more dependent, and a lot of bad things and negative things are happening as a result of it. It's unknown what happened to the Dres lands and how they fared during the Oblivion Crisis, so I'm not going to really talk too much about that one. But transitioning into the Fourth Era, the Red Year devastated Vardenfell. Perhaps a small mercy and kind of more luck there as well. Dres lacked land on the Isle. They didn't have any territories on Vardenfell, which saw them avoid the catastrophe to an extent. While the marshland border territories were submerged by the swamps and the southern wall of Tyr collapsed, the Dunmer really didn't suffer too much. However, and this is why I actually accidentally said Argonians, this did have some consequences, at least with Tyr. When the Argonians invaded, the Dres district was perhaps the first target. As the Argonians were halted at Mournhold by Redoran forces, it can be assumed that lands south of it were either occupied, raided, or destroyed. With its fortifications weakened and destroyed, it can be assumed that Tyr was either overrun, occupied, or destroyed. and at least in my personal opinion, I do believe it was probably occupied as a new forward base to then further raid and sack other cities. Hence why they didn't capture Port Talvani, because it's far away from Blackmarsh. They just sacked the city. Now, regardless of which, the Argonians sacked much of the land south of Mournhold, and they even sacked the city itself before the Redoran forces came to halt them. Now, what does this mean for House Dres? Of all the houses we've covered, Dres seems to be the most hard-headed. They clung on to an outdated labor force, which in the end perhaps sealed their fate. But they often refused to bend, which made them defiant and bold, but in a way also made them foolish. Tradition meant everything to them, and their failure to replace slavery with any other new source of labor kinda caused a lot of problems for them. There were numerous slave revolts, assassinations, and even led to the disdain of the Empire, which saw their influence decrease, and then later Kraganmore and Ebonheart would then transition into Hlaalu's control. So obviously their reliance on slavery kinda doomed them in a way. However, they perhaps do have hope. While it was foolish not to find a viable replacement to slavery, whether or not it was the Argonians' intention to invade or conquer, or even seek revenge, it's safe to assume that Dres lands were a target. Hence, because the only other lands we know of that they sacked were that of House Talvani and potentially Narcissus. Narcissus isn't confirmed, obviously. Mournhold at the time, had a lot of Dres plantations around it, so it makes sense why Mournhold will be a target, as well as it's the capital of Morrowind. But Port Talvani and House Talvani was also a pro-slavery house, hence why they are understandably a target. Now, whether or not Dres was a target is still in question, but it seems like they were. And whether or not they regained control of Ebonheart and Kraganmore due to Hlaalu's decrease in influence, it's the only assumption we can have here is that their only city they have left is Necrum. That is their only confirmed city that they still hold. Yet there is hope, as I said earlier. It was their institution that consistently hindered them, which is perhaps why they joined Healthseth's side to abolish slavery against Redoran and Indoril. But while this doesn't wipe away clean of the centuries of atrocities that they have committed, it does shift their beliefs a bit. It shows that tradition can only achieve so much, and it shows that they're willing to adapt. Whether or not this is a new generation of Dunmer that are coming into power, or if it's a sudden realization that this isn't working, we need to change or we're gonna die. Because we saw what happened when people weren't going to change in Hlaalu, and they collapsed hard. They lost everything. And we saw what happened when people ignored the problems outside of them in Talvani. The major success story we have in adaptability of the houses we have covered so far comes in Redoran. So it only makes sense that now that Redoran has stopped and halted the Argonian forces outside of Mournhold, that Dres is going to attach themselves to that of Redoran and try to support them in every way possible. It makes sense in many instances in this case. Despite fighting against them during the Civil War, during the Abolition Age, Redoran does support slavery to an extent, so whether or not Dres wanted to readjust its policies to go back to that, whole institution, which I don't recommend at least, because it obviously caused so many problems for them, but it seems likely that Redoran, being the powerhouse that they are, that they are Dres's only hope for survival, at least in this case, because Dres has suffered a lot due to the Argonian invasion of Morrowind. So, regardless of which, I would assume that the cities of Kraganmore and Ebonheart will transition back under Dres's control with the extinction of House Hlaalu, or basically its unimportance now. So with that, this is a debate of tradition versus change, and it seems that they're somewhere in the middle. And while holding on to their tradition, they are willing to adapt and move forward with everything. So with that, I have to say that House Dres is one of the more interesting topics I've had the opportunity of researching, because they are perhaps the most they serve as a lesson that if you are willing to adapt to the coming of the events going on around you, that survivability is possible. And they have shown this through many of their instances. And whether or not they continue to survive is yet to be seen. And hopefully, as like a lot of these videos are ending lately with the House of Morrowind, we'll see in the Elder Scrolls 6. But with that, I hope to see you guys in the next video and in the Discord chat. The link is in the description below. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Give this a like if you like this stuff. House Indoril is next, and potentially House Dres, depending on how much, research we can actually yank out of what little we have. But with that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace. If you enjoyed, please like this video because it really lets me know you're enjoying this content. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. The links are right here for you to click on, and the Discord chat link is right here as well. And overall, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.